Thank you, Chairman. Secretary Esper, I want to start with you, and I certainly agree that we need a tenant bill of rights, and we've heard a lot of really good testimony from all of you and a lot of good questions from my colleagues about using that as a tool to address the unresponsiveness between some of these contractors and people in the housing, as well as the issue of who is the customer, because I can tell you from personal experience of people who've reached out to me, both a concern that they would be held that there could be retribution when they raise issues, and then also the issue of not having the contractor be adequately responsive because they're not the customer. But I want to switch gears and maybe come back to that issue and address the other half of this, because I think half of this is contract quality and enforcement of that contract, and half of it is basic standards and enforcement of those standards. So I want to understand the lay of the land across the board. You know, we heard from a former mayor. I'm a former city councilor. Any mayor, councilor, county commissioner will tell you that we have tools to deal with this. They're building codes. And I want to understand across all the services what the current standards are. So Secretary Espert, in the Army, what is the building code standard that base housing must be built to in your service branch? Is it uniform, or is it governed by the local or state building code standard at the site?
Yes, sir. My understanding is that under the umbrella agreement under which this privatized housing operates, that the commitment is that the privatized housing would abide by local standards, and it would be overseen by them as well. That said, I would want to take a look at what those standards are to make sure that they meet what our expectations are as leaders. We may need higher standards and a common standard, if you will. We've talked a lot about commonality here with regard to leasing agreements. I think common standards, common high-quality standards are the way to go.
I think you're dead on, and I think you're onto something here, because there is a patchwork of standards across the United States. County and city, we have, you know, Secretary Wilson is very familiar with Kirtland Air Force Base a few blocks from my house. They do not fall under the city of Albuquerque's jurisdiction, because that's where the boundary for the city stops. They're under the state or county standards. So I do think it makes sense for all of us to look at a uniform standard that may be a higher bar for safety, for comfort, for energy efficiency than what may be appropriate at the local level or what local politics might dictate. So for the other service secretaries, what is the current standard, and what is your opinion on the sort of approach that Secretary Esper just
Senator, to underscore the fact we probably need standardization, it's my understanding that we are held to a government standard, a DOD-oriented government standard, and my Naval Facilities Organization oversees the enforcement of those standards on original construction.
Secretary Wilson.
Senator, the Air Force Civil Engineering Center oversees the uniform DOD standard for construction. I think where we've had problems is in quality assurance of repairs and quality control, and that is often a manning issue, and we need to address that issue base by base.
Who, for each of the secretaries, once again, who would be responsible in your service branch for performing basic inspections to make sure that either new or existing construction meets code and or meets the standard for repairs?
Senator, I think if it's new construction, it's likely our Corps of Engineers would be responsible. And I think in all cases, whether it's that and repairs, it would be the garrison chain of command. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say, at the end of the day, the chain of command of that soldier also being involved is certainly on work orders will be extremely important. And to Secretary Wilson's point, we're looking at the same thing as we staff up at all of our installations, making sure we have sufficient quality assurance, quality control personnel at every step of the process are involved, and either doing 100% depending on the nature of if it's a life, health, and safety work order, or spot checking if it's a routine work order.
Okay. Secretary Spencer.
In the case of the Navy, sir, CNIC and then local housing office would be the responsible parties. Again, just reverberating what Secretary Esper and Secretary Wilson said, the quality, it's the quality control and quality assurance aspect that is going to be the real nuts and bolts to make sure that we enforce what we have.
Senator, on your basis, you will have a housing management office that is as we mentioned, undermanned for quality assurance. The Civil Engineering Squadron, with support from the Civil Engineering Center, assesses and the compliance with code-like items.
I want to thank all of you for the commitment that you made to Senator Cotton with regard to retribution. I also want to ask, what are we doing to make sure that that commanding officers understand that, as well as sending that message to rank and file? I have had at least one constituent raise the issue that they were afraid to bring some of these issues forward. So what is the mechanism, generals and admiral, for just sending that message loud and clear that we have an issue, and if you raise issues, you're going to be listened to, and you're not going to be held to some form of retribution?
The chain of command is command information mechanisms throughout the force to get that word out, but it is well understood that any sort of action, a reprisal action or retribution action against anybody who raises a complaint about anything, whether it's the IG, the EO, the EEO, housing, or you name it, it is illegal. It is not just against policy and regulation. It is illegal, and you will be held accountable if you engage in any sort of reprisal action against anybody who raises a complaint about anything. It's zero tolerance, period.
Admiral.
Senator, if I could just agree with General Milley, but just to make sure that we were clear here, it was a specific part of the NAV admin message that I sent to the Navy to make sure that we are particularly sensitive to this because perception can be as powerful as reality here.
Exactly.
And then I did a social media post, made it clear there, the inspection guide, the visit guidelines for visits to homes include a part of this, so we're being extremely sensitive to making sure that certainly we meet the legal requirements, but we also, from a perception management thing, are open to this.
Excellent.
I agree with both the chief and the CNO. In the white letter I sent out to all commanders directing the housing outreach with the intent to visit at the permission of the service member, their home either in a PPV or out in town. There's very clear guidance on what they can and cannot do, and what whether they refuse to visit or not. But as General Milley said, any reprisal and anyone who makes an allegation is illegal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.